All right. Well, it looks like it's about time for us to get started. I appreciate everyone's patience. We've had a few more people that have jumped on the call here, I guess our webinar, just in the last few minutes. I'm super excited to do this. It's totally worth it now because there's so many people that are attending, and we really struggled with the best time to hold it. But we thought, well, 6 p.m. is going to work for our office, and hopefully it works for a few people here in North America. But like I said, we're going to do our very best to make sure that this is recorded. But we are definitely amateurs running this, kind of working things out as we go. I'm going to try and switch to um, my video so you can see me. I've got a mic kind of in my face here, but I'm just going to switch and then see if you all can see me. All right. Now I've got to do some switching around here so that I know I myself am actually able to see. I'm going to pause that one. Okay, there. Okay, I can see myself, so I'm assuming you can probably see me too. Yeah, we're excited to do this webinar for you. I am delighted that you could all attend. Hopefully, we can get a lot of good stuff out of here. I'm so grateful that you've logged in, and you can see on the screen now if you're able to see both. Like I said, I've been kind of playing around with this a little bit, and sometimes it's been successful, and other times it hasn't been so successful. So, yeah, so that's enough of me. You've seen my face, and I'm going to switch back to the webinar. In future webinars, I may have more of a presentation format where you'll be able to actually see me talking versus looking at a webinar screen. But I think I've got enough interesting things in there to keep you entertained that you don't have to look at my ugly mug. But great to have you once again. And I know I keep saying that, but we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. So I'm going to turn off my camera now, and I think we should be okay. I'm going to enlarge this webinar screen. Okay, I think we're okay. Does everyone see the screen now? Are we back on board with the screen? I think we're probably okay. Just wait for a few responses. Okay, perfect. Good. Thank you, Angela, Mohammed, and George for confirming that for me. Okay, well, let's get started. So the Canadian Express Entry webinar, it's maiden voyage. All right. There's me. Who am I? Well, I'm going to get into it a little bit more detail, but basically I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer who has found himself to become very frustrated with immigration, unable to help the number of people that I want to, struggling with the realization that the services I offer are quite expensive, and I'm really not able to help as many people as I would like. So I thought, you know what? I'm helping people every day. They're coming into my office. They're paying my egregious legal fees. But in the end, there's many people that are coming to me because of the world of immigration that we're dealing with that I just can't help. And if they would have come to me maybe a year ago, everything would have been fine. But often they come to my office because that's who you go to when you have nowhere else to turn. You seek legal advice. And with the way immigration has evolved, it's left pretty much, well, many people, let's just say many people, in a situation where they really don't have any options left. So I pretty much had enough of that and turning people away and not being able to help them. I thought, you know what, I have to be more proactive. So that is the reason that I have started this process. Today, we're going to cover the essential tips on submitting your express entry profile. And just in terms of housekeeping, I am going to be covering a ton of information here. We're going to go through this as quickly as we can. So I want you all to get your pen and your paper or your handheld or whatever it is that you're going to take notes. I want you to get those out now because and turn off your cell phone. Close out all your other applications that are going on your computer, your phones, or whatever it is you're viewing this on. Shut them off and focus with me, and I can guarantee that it's going to be well worth your while. Now, I've already, I've got here, don't be afraid to comment. Well, I can see the engagement, which is just awesome. It's fantastic. I am so grateful that I have Billy Young, who is in my office, an immigration consultant who is so much more than an immigration consultant. She worked within immigration for years, and she's truly the backbone of our operation here. And so she is doing her very best to be the moderator of the comments. I literally cannot look at them because if I do, I'm going to be distracted because they're just scrolling so quickly. So she'll do her best to try and answer. If she doesn't answer you, please don't be offended. We are trying to sort through the questions that will have the most general application. And she will, like I said, try to answer as quickly as she can. But I know that she's just one person, and there's way more people here than we ever thought possible with this webinar. So let's move forward with that. Now, the first thing I want to say is that I'm going to offer something special. You guys have all taken the time to sit in on this webinar and to make it worth it. And so in return, I want to give something back to you. So I've got a special offer. I'm going to give away 3 1-hour free legal consultations to whoever of you are the best note takers. So while I'm sharing all of this information, I want you to take notes, and the people who actually do the best job of it are going to be rewarded. So later in the webinar, at a time, I'll let you know when it comes, I will tell you how to provide those notes to us, and then Billy will have the sole discretion in determining who of all of those who submit their notes to us are the winners for these 1-hour legal consultations. And I'll just jump back. These legal consultations are about $375 an hour is what I charge. And then when you add on GST, it's right around $400. So it's a $400 value for each person who takes the time to forward those notes to us. And that'll be later in the webinar. So I hope that encourages some of you to really engage and really focus. So let's get on this bus and let's start hitting the road. Okay, here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to touch a little bit on what Express Entry is because some of you may not even understand how it works. Let's face it, it's a new program that just came out in January of this year. And so some of you may need a little clarification on there. Then I'm going to get right into the important things. Top 5 things to prepare before applying for Express Entry. I've written a blog on it, but that can be found on my website, but I'm going to expand. And this is where I add some of the more details. Then we're going to discuss the top 5 reasons people are deemed ineligible. Now, CIC has this Come to Canada tool. And sometimes when you're trying to do it yourself, you have to go through that tool to get your login key. And sometimes you'll get bounced. And when you do your own calculations, you should qualify. But for some reason, you can get bounced and just not know why, and it can become really frustrating. So I'll help you with that. And then, let's face it, some of you may not be able to qualify. You just may not be eligible. And it may just be your circumstances or just the stage in life you're at. You may not at this stage be eligible to qualify, but I'm going to give you some tips on how to improve your chances. So we've got something that hopefully will cover off the interests of everybody that's attending this webinar. Okay, I think if you followed my podcasts, if you have read my blogs, you've noticed that I love to share who I am. And largely that's a reaction to all of these websites out there, whether they're immigration lawyers, consultants, or just these ghost consultants who have these websites that are all slick and have all of all the little bells and whistles, but you have no clue who's actually representing you. You have no clue who's giving you information. And in fairness, it's impossible for you to tell who knows what they're talking about and who has no clue. And so I'm going to share who I am. And maybe it's a little bit more information than you really want to know, but I want you to know exactly who Mark Holthe is, what drives me, why I've spent hundreds of hours to do this for free, for $0 in return, and just my honest and sincere desire to help people. So here's who I am, and this may be my roots probably will explain a little bit why I'm doing what I'm doing, but let's talk a little bit about myself. So here I am, Southern Alberta farm boy. So the picture in the left, you can see those awesome cowboy shirts that my mom made for us, me and my brothers, all matching. Oh boy, did we hate those shirts. And then on the right here, you can see me and my 4-H calf. So 4-H was a club for farm kids, and I raised that calf from a little guy. And then that was the show that we had when we were showing him off. So I was pretty proud of him. Sports has dominated my life. Why I'm a lawyer, I still question why I'm a lawyer. My goal was to become a phys ed teacher, and I did realize that for a short period of time, but then decided to move on. These are just some pictures of me doing something that I absolutely love, which is high jump. Now I'm probably about 60 pounds heavier than those days, but I can tell you that was my absolute passion. And it reached a stage where I had the opportunity to actually participate in the Barcelona Olympic trials for Canada. So you can see all those other athletes, and I'm off there on the right, this little farm kid who had no clue really what he was doing. All these other guys were training twice a day, and I basically got off the tractor and hopped on the plane and flew out to do it. But hey, Athletics Canada paid for my flight and my ability to go there. So it was just an awesome experience. I also played volleyball in college, and I was the captain of my volleyball team, and it was just a wonderful experience. And all of those experiences, I guess, to a large extent, helped me to become who I am today. Then I became a high school teacher. Now, I didn't just jump into it. Obviously, while I was playing volleyball in college, I was working towards my teaching degree and my dream of becoming a phys ed teacher. And here I'm actually teaching, I think if you can see it closely, I'm teaching volleyball. I think it was a class that I was teaching in preparation for finishing my teaching degree. But this is the only picture I could find. Then, yes, I moved on to law school, and there's a number of reasons why I did. I left behind teaching, but to a large extent, that was the first step that I did in getting on the path that I'm on now. And here is me with my immigration officer uniform, and that's actually the port of entry that I worked at. So Chief Mountain on the Alberta-Montana border, and also Carway, the port of entry is there. And so that's where I got my first introduction to immigration. I'm way too happy in that picture, way too happy. Maybe because I knew I wasn't going to remain an officer and that I was going on to law school. And actually, picture was taken between first and second year law schools, and first and second year of law school. And that really shaped my passion for immigration, and pretty much the rest is history. So I went on and was managed to graduate from law school. I was called to the bar in Alberta, and these are the reasons why I went to law school. My mom on the left there, who I never would have been able to support her in her, as she's failed quite a bit recently, and I've been able to, because of the decision to go to law school, I've now been able to help her and help her with her retirement, and so that she's got someone to take care of her. And then these little guys, and obviously. You see 3 there. So I went through law school with 2 little kids, and there's the finished product. Now, the photographer took this picture. I didn't realize when I tried to scan it that he was trying to make it difficult for me to copy it, but that's okay. I still did anyways. So you can see my family there. My son Adam, he's actually even bigger in the back there. He's taller than I am now. But that's Michaela on the left, my little daughter, and then myself, and then my wife Deanna, and then Adam, the big kid in the back, and then Connor in the front, and Jessica, who's graduated and in college this year, is on the right. So that is the most important reason I became a lawyer. All right, bam. So I wasn't going to relinquish my ability to teach. So what I did was I channeled all that experience in teaching into presenting, and I probably love teaching people more than I love even the practice of law. But whether it was colleges, Lethbridge College or the University of Lethbridge or Ashton College, all these different locations, the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, I travel and give presentations at the Canadian Institute. I've taught lawyers with the Legal Education Society of Alberta. The last 2 times I've done immigration seminars for lawyers. And then, of course, the Canadian Bar Association, of which I was a part for years and years. Just a wonderful organization. I was able to be involved in teaching other lawyers how to practice immigration as well. And then across the top, you can see every once in a while the newspapers call me for a little bit of commentary. Sometimes I have interesting things to say, sometimes I don't, but for whatever reason, they feel I'm sufficient authority to reach out to me. So And if you check out CBC and search my name, they actually have reached out a number of times to get my comments on the process of express entry. And most recently, they wanted to know how I thought the matching system was working. And as I teach you a little bit more, there is an ability for employers to match up with foreign nationals through the job bank, which I can tell you is a complete joke, which I relayed to the officer, which I relayed to the news reporter, Susanna Moss with CBC. It's not functional. And I think, maybe I'll ask you, has anyone tried to actually submit their profile already? So has anyone made that attempt to submit their profile? Let me know. Let me see your comments. I'll try to make sure that I'm not getting too distracted with them. But has anyone tried to submit their profile before? Okay, I see on May 20th. Yeah, not yet. Perfect. Okay, well, those of you who don't have an employer, you actually have to register with the job bank. Has anyone had any contact with an employer who's reached out to them through the job bank and through this, what I call eHarmony process of matching employers to employees? Has anyone out there had any luck actually matching up and getting even an interview for that matter? Oh, Manika says yes. Oh, that's fantastic. You are the first person I've ever heard to actually have a connection. Oh, and Jamie as well. Now these that's great. That's great news. So now I guess the next question is, has anyone actually been given an offer? And it looks like Rolly as well. Has anyone been given a job offer through that process? Why don't you? I'll just wait for your comments to come through. Any job offers, especially you guys that had an interview. I'm still waiting here. Okay, we'll let Billy catch up to me here on that one. So that's the golden question. Has anyone actually been able to receive a job offer? If yes, then that's something I'm definitely going to report back to Susanna Moss and CBC. All right, let's continue moving forward here. I'm going to try not to get distracted by all those wonderful comments. So, in addition to all the places that I've spoken at, I've also been a part of a number of professional associations and recognized for certain contributions that I've made to immigration. But I don't want to dwell on those. You can go and read my bio in full on the website. I think I've spent probably sufficient time talking about myself here. All right, so let's hit the pavement running here. Immigration in the news. Now, I'm almost positive some of you have been affected by this. Here is a newspaper article, CBC News, that came out April the 14th, 2014. This is when the foreign worker program and even express entry to a large extent, this is where things started to turn for immigration in Canada. It used to be bliss. It used to be just a great process for people who wanted to come. They'd come over on a work permit. They'd have so many pathways to permanent residence. It was just a wonderful thing. It was a pleasure practicing immigration law. Well, as of this experience, and as of this in this particular case, it was McDonald's accused of favoring foreign workers, which I think everyone here on this call can empathize that it wasn't a case of favoring. It was more a case of knowing that the foreign workers were some of the only individuals that those restaurants and otherwise could actually rely upon, because the foreign workers are so awesome. They're reliable. They work hard. They do everything that they're asked to do. And what employer wouldn't want to fill their whole business with wonderful foreign workers? Well, unfortunately, in the process of doing that, the food service industry really caused some significant harm to our foreign worker program and really immigration in general in Canada. And so Ottawa, when they heard that there were some Canadians that were actually not getting jobs, even when they were flexible, like this Tim Turcott here, who said he dropped off 60 resumes at various McDonald's locations in the last 2 years, and said he was willing to work at any time, but never got a call back. Well, that doesn't work so good, because the principle is that Canadians should have the first crack at any positions. But in this case, it caused a huge ripple effect. And that ripple effect was our previous minister, Jason Kenney, who essentially put a moratorium and blocked all the food service industry from obtaining any foreign work, any new work permits. Now, that all slowly resolved itself to some extent, but with significant restrictions. And so what the government wanted to do was they wanted to figure out a way to move employers away from reliance on the foreign worker program. So what they did was they created this lovely express entry system, which is the source of our webinar today. And this express entry system, if you jump down to point 4 here on this slide, you'll see that the temporary foreign worker program was actually quite an embarrassment to the Conservative government, who ironically are no longer in power. Now it's a Liberal majority, and we really don't know how that is going to play out ultimately with permanent residents. But that temporary foreign worker program was an embarrassment to the government, so they hoped that express entry would be the solution. And the key was, if we could get companies who needed to source foreign workers to go through permanent residents and to bring people in through as permanent residents versus temporary foreign workers, then we wouldn't have this whole nightmare of managing the foreign worker program. And so they said, we will process these permanent resident applications within 6 months. And in some cases, that may have even been as quick as it was taking to get a work permit, such as in Manila, for example, where processing times at the time had really skyrocketed to 7 or 8 months. Well, it was almost faster to bring someone in through permanent residence through this new express entry system. So it was launched January the 1st, and it essentially manages all of the economic immigration programs. So if you want to immigrate to Canada as a skilled worker, you have to go through express entry, subject to some different categories within some of the provincial nominee programs. So it manages the programs that were previously in existence: the Federal Skilled Trade Program, the Federal Skilled Worker Program, and the Canada Experience Class, or the Canadian Experience Class. And so now it express entry basically is placed in front of these programs. And as we go a little bit further into the actual steps, the first thing you have to do is ensure that you, as a foreign worker, or as a foreign national, I should say, that you meet the minimum requirements of each permanent resident category before you're eligible to submit your profile into the pool. So although express entry is in existence, there is a comprehensive ranking system, that there's a matching process, and all these kinds of things. The reality is, step one, when you're creating your profile, you have to be able to show that you actually meet the minimum requirements of one of the permanent resident programs. And as we talk about this a little bit later, you'll see that in some cases, people who are not eligible for express entry, it's because they don't meet the minimum requirements of one of those previous programs. So once you meet one of the programs, then you're able to create a profile and submit it into the express entry pool. And then you just kind of swim around there, floating around. If you don't have a job offer already, which is a job offer supported by a labor market impact assessment. So that's super important to realize, that the job offer is only a job offer that will get you points if it's supported by an employer who has already gone and obtained a labor market impact assessment to support that job offer, which basically means there's no Canadian that can fill that job that you want to fill. And so therefore, they can support your permanent residence and virtually guarantee that you'll be given an invitation to apply. So you submit your profile, you then register with the job bank, and as we saw here, some people actually were matched, which is phenomenal. Well, at least you were given an interview, which is really good. Maybe they were going through the motions, and maybe I'll just check in with Billy here and see if there was anyone who actually received a job offer. Was there anyone, Billy, that actually received a job offer?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Fantastic. Look at this technology.
I'm not super loud for everybody, am I?
I guess that's a question we can ask everyone.
I just don't want to be yelling.
I guess they can turn their
There,
volumes down.
okay. It did appear that yes, there was a job offer, it looked like here, but have to admit I'm having difficulties when you ask the question. That
Yes.
it changes my view of the question board completely. So I am playing a little bit of catch up here, but yes, there were a couple of people that indicated they had a job offer. So
Well, that's awesome. So that gives us hope for the future then, for all those other people who are not in Canada right now, who are looking to try and get a job offer to support the permanent residence. It actually is happening. So it's not a complete and total bust, at least at this stage. So wonderful. Thanks, Billy. Okay, so with that job offer, if you have it, then you don't have to register your profile on the job bank, obviously, because there's no need. But those of you who don't have a job offer, you need to register with the job bank. And once you've done that, then your profile is officially entered into that express entry pool, and you're just kind of swimming around there waiting for the day when the government decides to issue another series of invitations to apply. And what they do is they rank you against all of the other candidates in the pool at that time when they do the draw. And those that have the highest comprehensive ranking score are then given an invitation to apply. And so in the old days, it was simply a matter of whoever applied first would then be processed next in the queue. So it was first in, first out. And it created a huge backlog. So the government wanted to get away from those backlogs, and they wanted to do a system where they could handpick who they wanted and that they could make sure that permanent residence was issued quickly so that people weren't languishing for years. And there's pros and cons for why they did that, but this is the world we're living in now. So it doesn't do any good to complain, unfortunately. We just have to figure out the best ways to work within the system that's been given us. So the invitation to apply is given, and then the candidate has 2 months to submit their permanent resident application. Now, this is where I want to give you a tip. This is important, so pay attention. If you're only given 2 months to submit your permanent resident application, if you wait to do your police clearances, if you wait to do your medicals, if you wait to do, to get your educational credentials assessed, once you've got your ITA, it's likely going to be too late. So do not take the chance. Take the time to get those things in order even before you submit your profile, especially when you've known, at least based on the totals, the CRS scores that have been issued, that you have a good chance of qualifying. Do not wait. Don't wait. Because I've seen people who have waited and then they tried to submit their permanent resident application without having the documentation. And then remember, in the old days, if you didn't have everything, it was okay as long as you had the basic information for that file. The government would hold it, then they'd issue a letter to you stating the deficiencies in your application, and then you were able to resubmit the application. And so it was a pretty streamlined process. But today, in the world of one-touch processing, basically, if you're missing something, it just gets refused. And if you are desperately relying on that invitation to apply to then apply for permanent residence before, let's say you're in Canada and your work permit is expiring, it can be devastating. The consequences of having that permanent resident application bounced for some minor technicality can mean the difference between you staying in Canada and fulfilling your dream or having to go home and losing out on that opportunity and all the years and dollars that you sacrificed to even get to Canada. So don't make that mistake. And ultimately, the government has said if you have your application completed, you submit it within the 2 months, that they will guarantee that it will be processed in 6 months. Now, that guarantee is subject to, I think they've said about 75 or 80% will be guaranteed for that 6 month. But largely that's if there's some back and forth that has to happen and there's things that take it outside the normal processing. So that essentially is express entry from a high level. But let's take a quick look at the points because that's important to understand. So how the comprehensive ranking system works. Well, if you take a look at this graphic on the right, this infographic, you'll see that basically it's broken down into a stream for individuals that are single and individuals that have a spouse or common law partner. And if you are married, that affects your points. It really does. And so if you're an individual that is highly educated, has lots of work experience, but your spouse doesn't, if you look at it carefully, you're actually prejudiced to some extent because your spouse is awarded certain points for their background, their education, and experience factors as well. And so if you're single, you would get 500 points, a maximum of 500 points. But if you're married, you get a maximum of 460, and then your spouse would have to earn that remaining 40. So it's, when it comes to the human capital factors, that can actually play a role. Now, you never ever want to go through the process and pretend that you don't have a spouse if you do, because that would be misrepresentation. That would be terrible. But I just wanted to point out the fact that if you do have a spouse, that does impact on the points that you are awarded. So high human capital is super important. You can get a maximum of 110, and now these points that I'm indicating here are for singles. So a single individual, maximum of 150 for language, 160 for education, and Canadian work experience is 80. And then when you add on the transferability points, that gives you a total of 600. And the maximum total points are 1,200. So if you do not have a job offer with a labor market impact assessment, you are missing out on 600 points, almost half of the points that are awarded. And so you can see how important it is if you do have that job offer. It's essentially a slam dunk for permanent residence. But I want to show you here just the rounds of invitations, and I haven't put the date. It's kind of irrelevant. But the first one started to come in early 2015, and the most recent two, you can see the comprehensive ranking system points were about 450 points. So we know that any individual who has a job offer supported by an LMIA was absolutely guaranteed to be drawn for almost, well, except for draw number 9, all but the first 4 draws, really. Well, I guess, sorry, number 4 and number 9. So those individuals were going to get 600 points right off the bat. So they're going to, anyone with a job offer in a skilled occupation is going to rank automatically higher than a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon who doesn't, who's looking to immigrate to Canada. So that puts things into context. But the loaded question, the question most people ask me is, do you think the total is going to go down? Does it make sense if I'm hovering at 400 points for me to even apply, or will the totals never go down? Well, you have to understand the draw totals of invitations that have been extended in each of these rounds has hovered right around 15 or 1,600 people a time. Well, if you think that there's probably going to be anywhere from 70 to maybe as high as 80,000, maybe that's a little generous, but 70, 80,000 permanent residents under the economic permanent resident categories each year, well, at 15 or 1,600 a pop, that just doesn't add up. And so people say, well, why are the draws so small? Well, they're so small is because we still have all of those backlogs from the old days with they're trying to process all of those long queues of applications. They're trying to flush those through the system. So once they get flushed through the system and they're processing everybody directly into Express Entry, then believe it, those totals are going to drop. And at my last national immigration conference in Ottawa, one of the officers indicated that CIC's expected sweet spot was somewhere between 350 and 450. Now, ultimately, we'll have to see how that happens because obviously the lower the totals drop, the more people are going to be able to qualify. And so they're going to manage those inventories carefully. But 350 to 450 is actually the range that they expect it to kind of settle to once everything evens out and all of the old applications are processed. So keep that in mind. Don't lose hope if you do not have a high enough level right now. It may be a year, it may be 2 years, but remember to stay strong. Don't just give up. Now, also, I'll point out that with the Express Entry pool, your profile will only remain in there for 1 year and then it will expire. That doesn't mean that you're done. You just need to revive it and resubmit it so that it has fresh content. And they do that just to make sure that people's profiles don't become stale within that pool. All right, so what does this mean for people? Well, as I hinted at the beginning of the webinar, part of the reason that I got into this is because people like this would come to me. Now, I'm definitely not as old and gray as that person. We'll pretend he's an immigration lawyer who has no clue. Let's pretend he's a dabbling lawyer, or he's a lightweight consultant who has no clue what he's doing. And these people are asking him a simple question, and he's saying, I don't know. Immigration changes every day. I have no clue. And that is actually true. But in all honesty, I felt like this guy on the other side of the table there. Clients would come to me. They would be running out of time on their work permits. They would be willing to pay the $400 an hour to get advice and direction. They'd come to me. I don't offer free consultations, and they'd be willing to pay. They'd come on the other side of my desk right here in my office. They'd explain their situation, and I'd realize that because of steps that they'd taken, either by choosing to use a representative that didn't know what they were doing or relying on advice or direction that they found on the internet. And trust me, there are some good sources out there. David Cohen's his immigration forum. I was sifting through there the other day just to see what was there. And I was quite impressed. There was lots of really good information there. But one of the problems is it's hard to tell what's good and what isn't. And if you just rely on everything that you hear, it can result in really your hopes of becoming a permanent resident and remaining in Canada, those hopes being dashed. And so these individuals here in this picture are like many of my clients that came in the last few months, where I had to tell them that, look, if you'd come to me a year ago, I would have been able to help you. And I felt awful because I really truly wanted to see people succeed, especially when they worked so hard and made so many sacrifices to come to Canada. And then to have the government make some changes to the programs and basically throw off their whole plan for the future. And when they came to my office and we talked, and I had to tell them, look, I can't help you. There's nothing that I can do. It's too late. It was really hard for me to justify billing them. And sometimes I did because the value that I offered was there. But other times when I just, these are people who were down to their last dime trying to stay in Canada, I ended up just sending them away without billing them. And obviously, that's not a great business model for me. And as my staff and Billy can probably attest, I won't ask her to chime in on her thoughts because I already know what they are. Giving away everything for free isn't a great business model, and it was starting to impact on our firm here. And so, because of that, and not just these people, there's students, for example, and I want to ask how many are post grad students? How many of you have come to Canada and you have you've gone through school, you've spent all of those thousands of dollars to come to Canada and realize your dream, and now are faced with the reality that they're already starting to come in here. I'm a post grad, Santhosh is, and Iris, and you've hoped and planned and you had everything scheduled and you knew that by coming to Canada you would have an easy pathway to permanent residence. And now with what the government has done, they've basically just closed the door for you. What's hard is, there's so much. I see a lot of people, Jane and Armin, that are in this situation who have counted on getting permanent residence, and then the government all of a sudden just closes the door. And so I had those people come, or there was when I think about individuals, so many people from the Philippines, and my heart just goes out to them who work so hard for their employers, and now because of the changes, including the closure of some of our provincial nominee programs, now they just have no options left. And but it's not just the lower skill individuals or the trade level positions. We're also talking about IT professionals and who also planned on coming to Canada, getting a great education, and many, many dollars were spent getting that education. Now being told, sorry, you're going to have to get a company to prove there's no Canadian to fill the position before you're going to qualify for permanent residence. And how many people are in this latter category where you came here to work, and you were told by the recruiter who brought you in, or whoever it was that enticed you to come to Canada for this wonderful opportunity. How many fit into that category as a foreign worker who's now really in a tough spot? See if there's any foreign workers out there. Yes, Sam. Uh-huh. Any other foreign workers? Yeah, you bet. Abhishek, great. El Marie, and I apologize for, it's always wonderful with immigration, all the different names and the spellings. And so, I try to turn my Portuguese mind on and think, okay, how would it be pronounced in Portuguese? But it doesn't always work very well. But Rasul, Francois, oh my goodness, now they're all starting to pile in, all of the individuals that are in that situation. So, yeah. So you can see that, you guys are not alone, and there's many of you that have probably felt like one of these groups of people, where you've planned and hoped and dreamed, and now it's going to be really tough. So I had to figure out something. I had to figure out a way to reach more people, to be able to help more people. With legal fees of $400 an hour, it was great for all the multinational companies I act for. And I don't make any excuse for the fees that I charge. The reality is there's companies who value my expertise, and the Law Society of Alberta prevents me, and they tell me I cannot say that I'm an expert, so I'll never say that. But I do focus exclusively on immigration, and it's my life. So aside from saying that I'm an expert, I have a little bit of understanding about immigration, and so when I had all these people who've come to me and not had any real any place that they could really go for information they could trust, I knew something had to change. So I created, at the beginning, the Canadian Immigration Podcast. And I'm not sure how many of you have actually listened to the Canadian Immigration Podcast before it became a website, but those are pretty feeble days. And so early, probably, I think even July of 2014, it's probably over a year ago, I dabbled a little bit in it. And then and then through November and December, I did a few more podcasts, and the results were staggering. I was shocked at how many people actually listened to it. And so I scaled everything back, and I realized, you know what, I have to do this right. And so I took time off. I took a podcasting course. I spent thousands of dollars on equipment and other things to do this properly, to put us in a position to now do what we're doing today. And so I'm super excited about this, and about the opportunity I have to reach so many people now through this webinar format. All right, now you can probably hear that little noise in the background. I'm still working through this GoToWebinar product here. So we created the website, and that's where I started to blog seriously. And you probably read some of the blogs that I wrote on my website. You can go there and you check those out. But they're all designed to give you information that's actually useful, not some regurgitation of what CIC has on their website, but practical knowledge you can rely on. And then I started to podcast a little bit more, and I've got a little bit nicer audio quality and things like that, and start to do it in a much more intentional way, all with the purpose of trying to help as many people as I can. And when we started our little Facebook page, it's been phenomenal. It's been just staggering. In 2 months, we've had over 3,100 Facebook likes, and our mailing list, which I'd encourage. I think all of you have probably signed up for the mailing list now, but we're just about at 3,000 people as a part of our Canadian Immigration Podcast community. And so our CIP community, that's what I want to grow. All of us together, working together, because no one person can know everything there is to know about immigration. It changes too quickly. And without clear policy, it's just impossible. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything there is to know. I like to think I have a pretty good grasp of things, but there's always people who come back and provide feedback to me that, about something that immigration is doing, in a negative way or in a positive way, that then I'm able to relay to all of the people that are following me. And so thank you so much for that participation. So let's jump into something a little bit more substantive. I asked you to send me questions for the webinar, and I have a huge problem. It's a massive problem. I have had no means of keeping up with all these questions. I was doing so good up until about, I'd say 3 days ago. And then they just started piling in so fast. Some of these questions were very similar. And those are the ones I've embedded now within this podcast, and within this webinar. And I actually got up this morning at about 3:30 a.m. to try and incorporate some of those general themes into the webinar. But there was a lot that were just too specific and confidential for me to address in this webinar. And so first off, I want to apologize for all those people who sent me questions that I wasn't able to respond to. But I can tell you that I think I have a solution, and this is something that I want to share with everyone. I'm going to do that later in the webinar, but it's something that I'm really excited about, and I think it's going to offer just a wonderful solution. Because let's face it, I physically don't have the ability. If I was to answer the questions in the volume that's come into me now, my practice would just shut down. The existing clients that I have, I would never be able to service them, and it's just not sustainable. And my wife and my children are kind of getting a little irritated lately because I'm just not around as much, and they need me. And so I've come up with a solution that I think is going to work both for my purposes and for all of those people who really need the help but can't afford to pay my traditional egregious legal fees. So I'll talk about that a little bit later in the webinar. All right, let's get to some good stuff. So top 5 things to do before you apply for Express Entry. Some of you will probably read the podcast that I wrote on this, or I can't remember if it was if I did a webinar, but this is the starting point. So before you even think about submitting your profile, these are the things that you want to do. And I'm going to start off by saving you, if you haven't started the process, to saving you $500 before you even get started. So this webinar is free, but here's $500 worth of tips. Don't follow CIC's instructions. at least the order in which they tell you to do things. So what I mean by that is don't rush off and get a language test first. So we know the IELTS and the CELPIP are the two designated organizations for English language testing for Citizenship and Immigration Canada. They cost about $265 to $300 Canadian. Do not rush off and do your test first. Don't. Hold off. And don't go and get your ECA done right now. So $200 to $226 is roughly kind of the range, and two of the organizations are U of T, their School of Continuing Studies, and the World Education Service. I'm just going to take one quick second. I've been talking a lot. I'm just going to have a quick drink of water here to just quench my dry throat. But in the interim, I want you to, in the comments, I want you to indicate how many of you have gone and gotten your English test already, just out of curiosity. And it's not a bad thing necessarily, but I'll tell you why why I'm telling you to do this in this order. But just indicate how many of you have gone already and had your English language assessments done. It looks like excuse me. It looks like a number of people have gone and had those things done, which is great. So um, let's see who we have here. Midlabel has done both. Francois done already. Renant said that was done me last January. Muhammad did the IELTS academic, and there's some that haven't done any of them yet. And Ishmael said his is going to expire. Well, that's definitely a concern. So you'll probably have to rewrite that. Okay, great. Thanks for that feedback. So as you can see, first thing, I'll just jump back. Don't rush off first and get your language test. Don't do your ECA. Here's the order that you're going to do things if you haven't started the process already. And in most cases, you're probably okay if you went forward and spent that money. But for some of you, it'll be a complete waste unless you clarify these things first. So the first, assess your admissibility to Canada. I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. Second, determine if you have at least a year of skilled work experience. Because if you're inadmissible for any reason and you do not have at least 1 year of skilled work experience, maybe you've been working for many, many years as a food counter attendant, and that is not considered to be skilled for the purposes of immigration, then you're not even going to get through the door. So don't even waste time getting your English assessed or your educational credentials assessed, because you will not qualify. Then once you've done those, then you can take your language test and get your ECA, your educational credential assessment. And then finally determine if you meet the requirements of one of the PR programs. But let's talk about admissibility. So understand that if you commit an offense and convicted of a crime outside of Canada that would constitute an offense or a criminal conviction under an act of parliament in Canada, then it has the potential of making you inadmissible. And if you're criminally inadmissible, then it doesn't matter if you make if you have 1,200 CRS points, you're still not going to be admissible. Medicals, this is another issue, and it's not just you with these criminal and medical problems, it's your family members as well. So if you have a family member that would be considered medically inadmissible or criminally inadmissible, then it's full stop. There are some applications that you can make if you're inside Canada, but ultimately these are some factors that you need to be aware of. And finally, which I unfortunately see quite a bit of, misrepresentation. Maybe it's not misrepresentation that, how do I say this? With foreign workers, especially within the food service industry, often your employers will say, "Oh, you're a food counter attendant. Well, I want you to close the store. That's okay. You can close the store, or I want you to, deal with inventory or things like that are clearly more managerial duties, or at the very least, food service supervisor. But you're routinely asked to do these things because you're awesome. You do a fantastic job. They can trust you. But the reality is your work permit is restricted to a food counter attendant. So what do you put on your permanent resident application? When it asks what you've done, your history, your activities, and you have to indicate on the application when you're filing your express entry, what do you put in there? And that can be a real issue. And misrepresentation is a topic for a whole other webinar, which I think there's some wonderful lawyers across the country that specialize in all of these areas. And I think as I go forward with my podcast, I'm going to invite some of them on to talk about these issues in detail. But for the time being, understand that if you're inadmissible to Canada, you're done. You're not going to be able to go through express entry. And it's at those times that I encourage you to actually seek legal counsel to see if there may be some options that can be put in place to deal with these inadmissibilities. And there are. So I'll leave that at that. So do you have 1 year of skilled work experience? This is important. You're to use the NOC 2011, not 2006. And that's important because anyone who's here in Canada on a work permit that's supported by an LMIA, you can actually find yourself in trouble if you are assessing your skill level based on the 2006 NOC, because there are some variations. And so basically the skilled work experience, you use the 2011 NOC, and it has to be 12 months of full-time or an equal and part-time skilled work experience. Full-time means at least 30 hours of paid work per week. So that's the bare minimum. Now, to save you trouble, I'm going to point you back to the website. And this is one of the first blogs that I wrote, but I am pretty proud of it. I think it covers a lot of information in helping you to know how to properly assess whether or not the work experience you have is really considered to be skilled work experience. So what I want you to do, has anyone read this blog? Have you read this blog? Just send me a quick comment. I'm curious to see if any of you have actually have actually gone through the process and read this blog and found it useful. Has anyone done that? Oh, a few people. Just looking here. Okay, yeah, a few people. Some no. All right, perfect. Well, that's fine. Those of you who are on the no side, I want you to go back to the Canadian Immigration Podcast website and look for this blog, because it will give you all the ins and outs into how you actually determine whether your work experience is skilled and how you can classify and determine which position it equates to under the National Occupational Classification System. All right, take a language test. So remember, it must be approved, and the information is clearly on the website, but the IELTS and the CELPIP test, the CELPIP is the in-Canada test. What you have to know is that when we start to go through the process of determining whether we qualify for one of these permanent resident programs, before we even get through the express entry process, you have to realize that there are certain levels that are very bare minimums. And so if you're applying for express entry and you've written these tests and you don't meet these levels, then you're done. You're not going to get through. And this is actually one of the tips I'm going to share a little bit later on the top reasons why you're deemed ineligible. Well, often it's because of your scores, and it's not an average. It's for each category: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. And so if you're applying under the Canadian Experience class, and you're in Canada and you've got that 1 year of skilled work experience, if your experience is at a NOC B, then CLB 5 is your level on the Canadian language benchmark. If your experience is at a higher level, a professional or managerial level, then your English scores have to be at a CLB 7. So sometimes people don't recognize that. With the federal program, whether you're inside or outside Canada, if you do not have a CLB 7 on all skill levels, regardless of what your position is, then you're not going to get through. So if it's too low, you're ineligible. All right, moving on. Educational credential assessments. These are the designated organizations. So you must have your credentials assessed through one of these. If you don't, then you won't get any CRS points for education. And if you don't have a guaranteed job offer right now with an LMIA supporting it, you're going to need to scratch and claw for every single point that you can. And this is where those points come. It's these educational credential assessments. Right now, if I'm to go back, I'd say probably that if you're in Canada, WES is probably the fastest, the World Education Services. But really, it just depends on the volume at any given time. All right. So finally, if you don't meet the requirements of one of the PR programs, you're not eligible for express entry. So this is really the assessment that you'll do right at the beginning. So those of you who aren't in Canada right now, this is where you're going to look. Do you have at least 1 year of skilled work experience? And skilled work experience for over a 1 year period is actually 1,560 hours with at least 30 hours per week. So that's the period. And it's continuous full time. So you can't break it into pieces. And paid, it has to be paid. So volunteer or internships don't count. And another reason, which the top reasons, I guess, that you can be found to be ineligible is that your work experience may be broken down into different NOCs. And and ultimately that it needs to be in the same NOC, in the same position. It needs to be within the last 10 years. Anything older than 10 years in terms of work experience doesn't count. And as I indicated before, skill level has to be at a 0, which is managerial, A, professional, or B, technical. And once again, refer to the NOC 2011. Once again, I'll reiterate CLB 7. So you have to have a Canadian language benchmark of 7. And then you need 67 points on the 6 selection factors. And this is the old way that they used to calculate points for foreign nationals living abroad and in Canada in determining which were the best and brightest for immigration to Canada. Well, you still have to qualify for the 67 points to even get through the door. If you don't have 67 points based on those 6 selection factors, and they are somewhat similar to the CRS factors, that looks at age, your education, work experience, language, but the point systems are calculated just a little bit different. So you must meet at least that minimum 67 points out of 100. And then finally, proof of funds. So if you do not have a job offer supported by an LMIA, and then you have to establish that you have sufficient funds to support yourself and actually get established in Canada. All right, Canadian experience class. 12 months, so at least 1 year of full-time or equal part-time skilled work experience, and it's in Canada, obviously, thus the Canadian experience class, and it must be obtained in the previous 3 years. Now, what's important with this is that only legal work counts. So if you are in Canada as a food counter attendant, which is a low-skill position, and your employer says, hey, I want you to fill this food service supervisor or assistant manager position, and you've worked at that position for over a year, well, understand if it's illegal work, then you cannot count it. And so, whoops, I bumped it there. You cannot count that experience, and it can be really, really disheartening for people. So don't let your employers push you around. You need to be working in the under the confines of the work permit that you were issued. All right. Just to reiterate again, if you're a NOC B, which is a trade or technical level, then CLB 5 is the Canadian language benchmark is what you need to have. NOC A and O, CLB 7. And for those of you who are postgrad students, any work experience gained as a full-time student simply doesn't count. So off-campus work, if there's some co-op work experience that you've gained while you're attending school, that unfortunately doesn't count. All right, and then the final one, which we can kind of whip through, but I'm curious, is there anyone here, and type into the comments again, that is working in a trade level position? So you're a welder, you're a carpenter, you're, whatever it, yeah, a trade level position who are looking at applying under the Federal Skilled Trade Program. Is there anyone there who's doing that? I'm curious. Oh, great. Sam is. Heavy duty mechanic. Awesome. Great, Sam. Heidi, you're not a janitor. I know you're not a janitor. Heidi is an HR manager of a large global company. That's pretty funny, though. She's just testing to see if I'm actually reading it, I think. Awesome. Oh, Elysia is a casino dealer. Cool. That's awesome. And then Millabel's spouse is an automotive mechanic. That's great. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So there are some people that are interested in this. All right, so federal skilled trade program, you need to have 2 years of full-time work experience or equal part-time in a skilled trade within the previous 5 years, so 2 and 5. You need to meet the job requirements of a skilled trade, and that's where it's important to go back to to the blog I wrote on determining your proper knock, because that will tell you exactly what that trade requires for experience in order to work within it. Now, you need to meet the requirements of the skilled trade, but you don't necessarily need to have that certificate of qualification from Canada to qualify. If you have an offer of a full-time employment for 1 year, and that's that magical LMIA supported work permit, an LMIA supported job offer again, or certificate of qualification from a provincial territorial authority. And it's interesting, with English, they actually lower the bar a little bit. So Canadian Language Benchmark for speaking and listening, and it's CLB 5 for speaking and listening, but it's a 4 for reading and writing. So there's the standard isn't quite as high for a federal skilled trade program. All right. Now let's get to another thing that I want to teach you, and I hope this information is useful. I wanted, like I said, with so many people and so many different needs, I tried to compile as much of this information as I could to give the most benefit to the most people. And traditionally, I would have had to, sit in front of someone on, in my desk and tell people one at a time how the Express Entry program works. But now I can take this message and I can amplify it to not only the people that are attending live, which I'm so grateful you are because it makes it so much better, but all of the other hundreds of people that are definitely going to be reviewing the recording of it. So here is the top 5 reasons people are rejected by CIC's Come to Canada tool. So if you've gone through this process, which most of you should, unless you've actually hired a representative to assist you, we have a separate portal that we as representatives, authorized representatives, use. But if you've gone through the traditional route yourself, then you're going to have to go through this, and you'll have to check your eligibility to see if you qualify. Well, sometimes you'll think that you've answered everything correct and you just keep getting this ineligible. Well, I'm going to share with you the top 5 reasons that most people get rejected. So you may fall into this. Has anyone had any issues with getting bounced from this or receiving a rejection? Let me know. Is there anyone out there that's tried to go through this process and has been bounced before? Oh, okay. Sandra has. Well, it's common. Trust me, you are not alone, Sandra, because there's a whole host of things that can happen that are not even your fault. Just the way you answer a question without even knowing could end up in causing you to be ineligible. So when I go through this process, sorry, I just got the URL down there at the bottom as well, just for your reference. When you're and everybody here will have access to the recording. We're crossing our fingers, anyways. There's going to be a good recording there, but everyone will have access to this. But that's the link that you go to access this really the entry point to Express Entry. This is where it all starts. Right here is with that link. Okay. So I asked the question already. I jumped the gun a little bit about ineligibility, and just looking here to see if there's anyone else. Okay, Rasul as well was. All right. Okay, so let's bounce to the next slide. So here's basically my top 5. So I just jumped right in here. First one, you don't have a valid language test. So understand, when you start to put your information in about your language test, it's only valid for 2 years. So if it's expired and been longer than 2 years, then that can result in you being ineligible. Also, if your language scores are not all at those minimum Canadian language benchmark levels, that can also bounce you from it. So you may think that, well, my average is a CLB 7, but I've got a 6, and then I've got 3 7s and then one, or a 6, 2 7s, and 1 8. So it averages at 7. You can get bounced for having even one of those underneath the minimum level. So that's the first one. You don't have 1 year of skilled work experience in one occupation. So sometimes people have pieces that they've put together to form 12 months, and that can also bounce you. Your funds are insufficient. I put that one in there because when you're going through the process, it asks you to indicate how much money you have. And there is a certain standard that people have to meet, which is called the low income cutoff, the LICO, that the CIC has stipulated, as minimums when people are immigrating to Canada without a job offer, because you need to have certain funds to actually establish yourself in a new country. Otherwise, you're going to be in rough shape. So they set up this requirement to have funds. Then the fourth, you don't meet the minimum criteria for one of the PR programs, which we've talked about already. So this is kind of consolidating all of this information into one little slide. But if you don't meet the requirements of one of those programs for whatever reason, it may not seem like when you're going through this. Let me just bounce back here. When you're going through this tool and you're answering the questions, they're not all in one systematic order. So sometimes just by the way you answer, you may not even realize, you may have plenty of CRS points in your mind, but ultimately you may be falling short of in particular, the Federal Skilled Worker Program, those 67 points, which are assessed on a different level. And then finally, this is the fifth one is actually a little bit more advanced. So you may have already gone through, and once you're issued your personal reference code, sometimes people key that in wrong, and it's important. And when you're trying to submit your profile and you've got that little reference code, if you type it in wrong, that can cause problems, and it can kind of trip you up a little bit when you're trying to actually submit your profile. So there's top 5 tips there. All right, now all of you, and I've been following these comments probably when I shouldn't be because it's a little bit distracting, but the questions and everything that people are asking, there's some specific questions, and in fairness, where do you go to get answers? Well, you can pay my egregious legal fees or a representative in your area, but you may just have a few. You may just need a little bit of direction, a little bit of guidance, and so the question that I've really struggled with is how to solve this specific question problem. Well, I think I have an idea. Everybody knows that despite CIC's, their consistent message that you don't need to hire anyone to help you, they really don't offer you a lot of tools to do it yourself. You're left to your own devices in many cases, and I'll tell you, their one-touch policy is just downright cruel, and the stakes are super high. Some of you out there who are listening to this webinar may be in a situation where you need to get that permanent residence because you're reaching your 4-year cap and you can't extend your work permit. And if you don't get it right, timing is everything. And it's heartbreaking to have this little piece of information that you omit or forget to include or misinterpret the question, and it can result in, like I said before, and I don't mean to be over dramatic, but it's a reality. I've seen it. People's lives completely being just their dreams and their hopes crushed because of one stupid little mistake that if they had only had someone to ask or someone to just give them a little bit of direction, then they could have avoided it. And in the end realized their dream of becoming a permanent resident of Canada and all that entails. And I'll tell you, I am so proud of my country. I love Canada. I love this wonderful land that I live in, and I know how precious it is. And when people, for small little mistakes, are unable to realize that dream, it's heartbreaking as much for me as it is as for them when they come to see me. And the reality is many people just simply can't afford to get it wrong, like I said. And despite what CIC says about doing it yourself, some people just need a little extra help. So, like I said, this ability of me to try and answer everyone's question and do everything for free is it's just really going to set me up for failure. I know it is. And so I'm going to tell you how I think we can resolve this. But before that, it's now time for those of you who have been so diligently taking notes to send those notes, a copy of them, to Billy. And that's her email address there, byoung@ht-llp.com. I want you to take your notes and either take a picture of them with your phone and email it to Billy, or if you've handwritten them, or if you've typed them, just email them to her. And then that'll give her a little bit of time before the end of the webinar to determine who of the fine folks who have attended this live webinar will receive the special offer of a 1 hour legal consultation with myself. And it can be on any immigration topic that you want. So it's not restricted to express entry. So now's the time to send those in. The top 3 note takers on the webinar will be eligible for that special offer. So I love doing that. So I'm excited to see how good you are. And ultimately, this is reliving my teaching days as a high school teacher, and I get to see how well my students are doing in taking notes. I'm sure, I'm sure there's some people out there that probably take them 100 times better than I do. But now's the time to send those in. All right, and just to reiterate that each of those consultations is roughly about a $400 value, but doesn't matter. I'm happy to do it. All right, so here's the solution. I have decided to create something that I call the Canadian Immigration Institute. And the very, very first course that I am going to offer is on express entry. And as I've pondered over this, you saw the slide at the beginning of the presentation, and I'm not going to go back to it, where all of the different places that I've taught seminars, and I've gave presentations, and I've taught all these people. And generally speaking, I love to do that. And so I thought, why can't I do that through the use of an online course? Why can't I teach people how to do their own express entry applications? At the end of the day, Billy and my other staff here in the office, Tanya, they're wonderful. And we absolutely love taking people's hands and walking them through the whole process. We love working with them and interacting with them. But let's face it, you're paying me money to have my staff fill in your forms, and some people want that peace of mind, which is wonderful. I would not be able to support my own family if it wasn't for wonderful people like you who do that, and we love to do that. But some of you just simply can't afford the legal fees to do that, and so I've come up with an idea to offer courses, and in these courses. You'll have access to a resource you can actually trust versus essentially taking your chances. And I've got chances there twice, I see, with the internet. Like I said, there's wonderful immigration forums, Facebook pages, well-meaning people who have all of the information in the world available to you. But the problem is, how do you know who you can trust and who you can't? And then, to top it all off, how many hours have you spent already preparing and studying and learning, trying to figure out how the express entry program works? Type in your comments. Let me know. I'm curious as to how many hours people have put in right now to this point trying to figure out express entry on their own. So just type in how many hours and let me know. You guys have all been so very patient with me as I've gone through all this process, and I've got a few more little gems that I want to give you. But for those who are hanging around to the end, I've got something special for you, absolutely. But just let me know with your comments. See if people are, if they've, if they're still connected. Okay, so Abhishek has 8 hours in. Jamie has 3 hours a day. Well, I haven't even asked how many days he's been at it. Lewis, 5 hours. Razzle, 15. Jane, almost. Oh, she says at least 50. Oh, and then we've got Manakath, 100 hours. I believe it. I believe it, because when you're trying to do it on your own and you're trying to, sorry, I get distracted by this countless LOL, Elizabeth. Well, I think we're all in that situation where, even us when it was first released, and I was involved in providing submissions to the government before express entry even became law. When they released express entry and the portal was established, I worked with many other lawyers on the Canadian Bar Association to try and make sense of it, and we drafted some questions, setting out all of the glitchiness of it, and so that we could give feedback to the government. And ultimately we spent, I can't even count how many hours. So I feel your pain. And so with this course, you get the benefit of all of our hours that we've already put in. So significant time savings. So you can just go to the source that you can trust, and you don't need to waste those 100 hours. You can do more productive things. And I can't help but read Heidi's comments here, all because I have an amazing attorney in Canada with a wonderful staff. Oh, Heidi, you're great. You're the best client that a lawyer could ever have. Anyways, I'll try to get focused again. I'm going to close out these comments so I don't get distracted. But anyways, significant time savings by doing it this way. And then the reality is you can save thousands of dollars in representative fees by doing it yourself with just a little help from us. And sometimes that's all you need, right? You can spend hours. I tried to get through to the call center just the other day to try and get some resolution to a mistake that the government made. They wrongly refused a work permit, and the poor individual has been without a work permit for over a month now, and it was totally CIC's fault. But ultimately, I feel how difficult it is for people as they're going through this process, and so by going through, and I'll talk a little bit about exactly what's in this course, but you can save thousands of dollars by going through our Canadian Immigration Institute and our very first Express Entry course. Now, just to recap, like I indicated, a source you can trust, significant time savings, and just the dollars in representative fees. So what does the course look like? I am so excited about this. This is going to be awesome. Every day, well, I shouldn't say every day. Some days when I'm overwhelmed with work, I tell my wife, oh, I wish I was a teacher. I wish I was back in the gymnasium, playing floor hockey and volleyball and basketball with the kids. I'd definitely be in a whole lot better shape than I am sitting behind this desk. But when I thought about this concept of a course and the ability to leverage my teaching degree and my experience as an immigration officer and the years of experience practicing as an immigration lawyer, and I practice in no other area, exclusively immigration, and wonderful staff like Billy and Tanya and my the other staff members within our office, we are able to take all of that knowledge, put it into a course, and then give it to you in whatever form you best can use it. So what my intention is to create a course, a pilot course, as you see here, that meets the needs specifically that you have. So all of those specific questions that you've asked me, I'm collecting every single one of them. And those questions are going to form, to a large extent, this course. And I shouldn't say going to form, they have formed this course. So here's how we're going to set it up. There's going to be 4 live weekly presentations, probably on a Monday, similar to this, where I walk you in a video format right on the computer, step by step, create tutorials on how you do each aspect of the Express Entry submission process. So I plan on doing it over a 1-month period where we have one of these presentations each week. Then, after that presentation, because some people will be able to attend it live, some won't, we will then have a 1-hour Q&A webinar that will happen a few days later. And so it'll give people some time to digest what I've taught them. And this is all from my teaching experience. I realize people don't get it right off the bat. They have to take it back and then apply what they've learned to their own circumstances. So 4 weekly live Q&A webinars. And we're also going to create a private Facebook group where everybody that is registered for the course can then share their knowledge and experience with the other members of our Facebook group. And it'll be a private group just for Express Entry and the Canadian Immigration, in this case, Institute students. And then my favorite part of this is unlimited email support. So any question, all those specific questions that you ask, I will be able to answer them. And I'll be able to point you back into the course content where the answers are and address specifically all of the questions that you might have leading up to the actual submission of your profile. And this unlimited email support, obviously, it has a limit. So it's not completely unlimited. If you're a crazy person and send me 200 emails a day, then I reserve the right to return your fees and kick you out of the program. So there is some element of reasonableness with this, just because we can't function otherwise. But I truly do mean genuinely working with people. And so often that will be all people will need, just that little bit of direction, that little bit of guidance, and then all of the resources from the presentations and the step-by-step guides. But some people will still have some things that just are probably best dealt with over a phone call. And so throughout the 1 month process here, I intend to give at least two 15-minute in-person calls. And we have to cap it for for logistics sake. But obviously, I'm not going to be a crazy person in my own right and say, oh, it's 15 minutes and 1 second, so we've got to end the call. We're here to legitimately help you, to try and help as many people as we possibly can. And then there's with everything that we've done here, we will have an immigration resource bank where all of the old audio, the old videos, the old podcasts, the Q&A sessions, those things will be available for people to consume when it works, because some people may not, the timing of the calls may not work for them, but everything will be available to watch in recorded form. And so I am super excited about this. I think it's going to be awesome. And the best part is just the fact that I'm going to now be able to help so many more people at the same time. Where before I had to do one-on-one assistance and my staff can only work on one person's file at a time, with this, we can have so many more people that we can provide help and direction to than we ever could before. And it's just, I hope it's something that you're interested in. I don't know if anyone here, if this would be beneficial to them, but I, I'm hoping that it will. And I guess ultimately we're going to see. Now, with anything that I do, I don't believe in just taking people's money and then just turning them loose. I offer a 100% money back guarantee. Now, how long is the course? The course is 1 month. So, if after 1 month you feel like it wasn't worth your time and it wasn't worth your money, and somehow we didn't give you the value that you would have hoped, then I will give every penny of your money back. 100% money back guarantee. So it's a 30-day guarantee. And the reason I do that is because immigration changes all the time. And the last thing in the world I want is a course that becomes stale dated. So I am going to make sure that everything is current and up to date and doesn't become stale dated. And that's why the course itself is gonna be covered in 1 month. Now, in all honesty, some of you may whip through it already, and you may even be close to filing right now and just need a little bit of direction and guidance. And in all honesty, with what we're going to be creating here, the tips and strategies that I'm going to give may even help some of you who have already submitted your profile but are not getting the levels of comprehensive ranking points that you would hope, and just need a little bit of direction or guidance. Or maybe some of your, the preparations that you're doing and getting reference letters and things like that. Maybe you just need that assurance and knowing that you're on the right stage for when that invitation to apply comes. So 100% money back guarantee is what will come with this program. Now, what a beautiful picture. Now it's kind of grayed out a little bit, but this is Waterton. This is where I literally live in the summer. The most beautiful place, just about an hour and a half from where I live. And when you look at just the price of things that are actually worthwhile, it makes it a whole lot easier to justify giving out your money if you feel like it's actually worth it. And if you look at the cost of hiring an immigration lawyer, I put it at about $5,000 Canadian to have someone represent you. And I don't put that dollar out there lightly. I know for a fact that there are people out there that will do your permanent resident application for far less than that. And that's the whole process. Far less. Maybe $1,000, maybe $1,500. But this is how much a truly worthwhile immigration lawyer is going to charge you. And in all honesty, probably a little bit more even at times. And so that's the cost of hiring an immigration lawyer. Sometimes people will do reviews, and those same immigration lawyers will do reviews for probably around $2,500. So you'll complete your express entry profile, and they will go in and they will review it, and they will make sure that there's nothing missing. When the time comes to get your invitation to apply, they will also go in and take a look and make sure that you've uploaded the proper documents and things like that. But reviews can run about $2,500. And then, as I indicated, with formal legal consultations, many of my colleagues out in Toronto are even charging more than $400 an hour for that legal consultation that's just an hour long. And so what I have proposed is that this express entry, the full course for submitting your profile at $997. And so you get all of the things that I've indicated here, all of the unlimited support. Really, there's very little difference. I'll be honest, in the knowledge that you're going to get hiring a lawyer directly for the full amount. And I want to qualify that if some of you want the peace of mind and just want to engage us to help you with the whole process, we can do that through Holte Tillman LLP. We're delighted to do that. But for some of you who may just struggle and not have the same amount of resources, and with the guarantee that we offer, I'm super excited, because if we were able to offer it at $997, that's much more attainable for people. Now, with that being said, I'm not done giving you information. So I want to give you the final piece to that outline that I set forth at the beginning of the webinar. So what do you do if you're ineligible right now? So these are 5 tips or 5 strategies that I want to give you out there if you are currently feeling like you're not going to be eligible for express entry right now. And some of them are pretty simple and pretty straightforward, but they're things that you cannot discount. If coming to Canada is really your goal and it's what you want more than anything in life, then sometimes these are some of the sacrifices that you need to make. So obviously, first, improve your English. If you're not at that CLB level 7 and you're outside of Canada, then go to school. Go back to school, and English school, I mean, at this stage, and do all that you can to improve your scores. Okay? That's the very first most important thing that you can probably do to increase your scores. Next, improve your education. So if you have a bachelor's degree, then consider getting a master's. If you have a master's, then consider getting a PhD. And I know that this seems like, it's pretty trite to just suggest these things, but the reality is that is what the Canadian government is focusing on. And so if you have within yourself the means to do that, that's what I would highly encourage you to do. Or you may want to obtain more work experience. So maybe it's just a matter of working a little bit longer. Now, there's always the trade-off, because with age, the more experience you get working, the longer you're in school, there reaches a stage where age starts to work against you, because the points start to drop pretty quickly. But do the math, do the calculations, and determine if that makes sense for you. Now, I was absolutely delighted to hear that some people had actually connected with employers. That's so exciting. And those of you who did that, I definitely want to learn more, because I want to understand the process from your perspective. I know what it is from employers, because we help them all the time, but I'd love to learn from you too. So please send me an email and let me know who you are, because I'd love to just pick your brain and find out a little bit more about your experience, because it's so rare. So obtain a job offer from a Canadian employer. Now, I don't want you to discount a work permit, because some companies still are able to get work permits for people to come to work in Canada. And if the position that's being offered you is a low skill position, don't discount that, because you may not qualify immediately for express entry, but it may give you the opportunity to come here and then receive a promotion potentially into a skilled position, or be exposed to the Canadian labor market and the jobs that are out there in a much easier fashion than trying to connect with an employer from outside of Canada. So that's my number 4. And then number 5 is, even though I know you postgrad students out there are in a difficult situation with qualifying for express entry, we do still have options that can flow from people who come to Canada and study. The difference now is that people know the rules of engagement. They know what they're facing if they come to study and the options that are available for permanent residence. They're not going to be blindsided like many of you were. They know what they need to do. They know they need to find an employer who's willing to obtain a labor market impact assessment. And although you get an open work permit once you've completed your studies, and even the ability to work up to 20 hours while you're studying, the reality is you are going to be here. You're going to have access to the labor market more directly. Canadian education is valued more than foreign education, and you're just going to become acclimatized to this crazy Canadian culture. So those are some suggestions that I give for those who are currently ineligible. So give those serious thought, and those should help. Now, you guys have been so patient with me, and I apologize. With all of the questions and everything I wanted to teach, I know that we're already an hour and a half into this, and I wanted to only have this for about an hour and then turn it over to questions. But this was really important for me, and I really wanted to be able to give as much value as I possibly could in this webinar. I didn't want it to be just a waste of everybody's time and just a regurgitation of everything that was on the CISA website. Although much of the information that I did pull that's where the source is. That's how we know what the requirements are. But I hope that the insights that I've given have been beneficial to you. And as I think about everything that's gone on, and I think about just the fact that you guys are willing to come on the very first webinar. There's no testimonials out there from all the people that have have taken the express entry course from the Canadian Immigration Institute and Mark Holthe and his team. No one has had any experience, but you're still here. You're sticking it out with me, and that means something to me. And so this here is where you can go to register for this link, the CanadianImmigrationInstitute.com /join. And what I'm going to try to do now is to show you exactly how you do it. I'm going to shift away from this PowerPoint and this presentation and try to go to my web browser. Hopefully it will work. I don't know what's going to pop up, but we'll see what we can do here. So bear with me as I try to open up that screen. It looks to me like I'm going to have to shrink this. Oh, and there I'm jumping ahead of the game. All right, so I'm going to move that over, and then I'm going to try and pull up my browser. Okay, all right. So www.canadianimmigrationinstitute.com. Let's see if this worked. Hooray. Okay, so this is the site. Now I just want to make sure that, okay, there. Now I want to confirm that everybody can see this. Can you just send me a quick note and let me know if everyone can see the website screen now? I'll just wait for comments to come in. Yeah, okay, good. Everybody can. Great. Okay, so you can see here there's options for you. The middle one, I'm going to show you right here something. Because you guys stuck it out with me, and because you've come on this live call, I'm actually going to slash the price 50%. And it's a pilot course. So although I am confident that the information you're going to get is going to be valuable, the reality is, for those of you who have stuck with this and stuck with me, I'm actually going to drop the price down to $497. It's a one-time, kind of a one-time offer for everyone that is on the podcast right now. And if you go ahead and you register for this while the podcast is on, and while during the question and answers till we complete it, then this offer of $497 will be there for you. And I'm excited because I want to create a course, not that I think you want to hear, but a course that actually answers the questions and the pain points and the difficulties that you've all experienced, and just puts it all into one neat little package that's just awesome. That is just the most phenomenal thing. So that's the middle option right there. You can see on my screen. You still have the ability to do a phone consult. And essentially, if you want to book a consult with me and you just feel like you just have a few questions that you need answered, and maybe you don't necessarily want to purchase the step-by-step walkthrough, then you can book a 30-minute consult for basically $375 an hour, which is $187.50 for a 30-minute consult. And then those of you who want the peace of mind, which, like I said, this is what I've done for years and years and years. And in all honesty, my fee has actually not gone up since I started practicing back in early 2000. And so for $4,997, we'll be a representative and we'll walk you through the whole process. Now, this $4,997 includes both the submission of your profile, which I didn't clarify here, but both the submission and the invitation to apply and the submission of permanent residence after. But I always want to make sure that the people that we're doing the full representation for have a legitimate and real chance of qualifying. So I don't believe in just taking people's money when I don't think they're going to qualify. So you can see here that you have the ability to check your eligibility. And if you click on this link, it will, oh, okay, well, we'll go back here and I'll assess that. It can't be perfect, can it? There's always got to be a little bit of a glitch. So I'll figure out why that link doesn't work. But anyways, we'll get that fixed, but you can check to make sure that you feel that you actually are going to be able to qualify. So that'll take you to that Come to Canada tool. And ultimately, like I said, unless we feel like you have a good chance of receiving an invitation to apply, we wouldn't want you to proceed down that road, because first and foremost, the relationship that we have with you is more important than anything else, and we want you to succeed. And once again, with this option, the full service as well, we give you 100% guarantee or your money back. And like I said, I have no business representing you unless I have a good feel that it's going to be successful. And we will fight for you all the way through to the end. So those are the options that are available. And I'm going to close that off, and I'm going to minimize this so I don't close our webinar. And then I'm going to jump back if I can. I'm going to just go to the full screen view. That wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was going to be. I'm actually quite happy. All right. So I'm assuming everybody can see the PowerPoint again. Is that okay? Let me know if we're back in with the full screen in the PowerPoint. Okay. How about that? I think now. There we go. We had two no's, and now Justin, my technical person here, he got me straightened around. Sometimes when we're flipping back and forth between windows, excuse me, there's little buttons you have to click to make sure that everyone can see. All right, I'm just going to take a quick drink here so that I can keep talking. Okay. Oh, there we go. There we go. All right. So, like I indicated there, you can see here from this graphic, there's the place that you can log in to register for the course. And like I said, there's a 50% savings for all of you who have been kind enough to stick around to the end. And we're just about at the stage now where I'm going to have Billy sort through and give me her thoughts on which of you are successful in being the best note takers. But before we get to that, and just to reemphasize as well that it's $4.97 Canadian, I'm still not happy with all the information that I've given you. So I want to give you, and I'm just going to pull all of these right up right now, my top 5 reasons that that people get their permanent resident applications bounced. And so this is kind of the next step, but I know that some people who have attended this webinar have already filed their Express Entry profiles, and I want this to be of value to you. And I don't want it, I don't want anyone to walk away without feeling like they've taken away something from this. And so the top 5 reasons people's PR applications are denied after receiving an invitation to apply. So first and foremost, reference letters are deficient. You can go to my Canadian Immigration podcast, and I've developed a blog specifically for this issue. Reference letters have to be worded in a certain fashion. They have to include certain language and certain pieces of information. And you can have 5,000, well, you can have 5,000, but you could have 1,200 CRS points if that was even possible. Apply for permanent residence and get your whole application refused because you failed to include one little aspect of the mandatory requirements within those reference letters. And let's face it, you're often getting these reference letters from employers long before you ever think to apply for Express Entry. So the one piece of advice I can give you is don't just submit those old reference letters. Go back and be very, very sticky with your prior employers. Do everything that you can to get those reference letters updated and give them the exact list of things that I've referenced in my blog, and which you will see once you receive an invitation to apply, the instructions from CIC. So don't take the chance. With the one-touch policy, it'll get bounced. It really will. And it's just trust me on this one. Okay, number 2, you forgot to include your police clearances. Well, maybe you didn't forget. Maybe you didn't know because you hadn't attended my webinar yet, and maybe it hadn't even been offered yet, that only in very, very uh, narrow circumstances will CIC allow you to uh, provide a police clearance after the fact. You have to show significant efforts to make sure that you have actually done your due diligence to get those police clearances before you file your express entry, actually the permanent resident process. So if you are an individual who submitted your express entry profile, you haven't yet obtained your police clearances, go do it immediately. You can't rely, like we used to in the past years ago, filing the application and then telling them that we will upload police clearances once they're received. I've seen applications refused for failing to include them. And that is just heartbreaking, something so small and insignificant. So don't take the chance, even if you've got people telling you, oh, I didn't have a problem, it was no issue, and there's lots of people out there. Don't trust them. You don't want to rest your permanent resident opportunities and on that. Now, number 3, you failed to include a copy of your degree with your ECA. I see that happen a lot. People don't realize that they actually have to upload a copy of their actual degree, not just the WES or the U of T educational credential assessments. So make sure that you don't forget to do that, because that can result in a bounce. The reality is, if your application isn't perfect, if it's not 100% perfect, it has a significant chance of getting bounced. And if it does, then you have to go back into the pool, and then you have to hope that the point threshold is going to drop down again so that you can be drawn. And for some of you who have LMIA-based work permits, who are giving you that extra 600 points and that guarantee of permanent residence, well, you may be reaching your 4-year cap. Your LMIA, your company may say, well, we can't get another one because of this whole overhaul that the conservative government did back in June of 2014. You may no longer be able to get another LMIA. And so you may be out of time, all because of just the smallest simple thing. And I don't want that to happen to you. Now, the 4th one, and I can't remember who it was who said the comment that their language test was expiring, but this is the case. You let your language test results expire. Even if they expire after you've submit your permanent resident application, you need to make sure that they're updated. Now, the stage at which they're okay, and you can rely on an old test, I wouldn't take the chance. I just wouldn't, because you don't know how long it's going to take to actually process that permanent resident application. And you'd hate for them to say, well, sorry, if your language test was valid for another week, I could have approved your visa, your permanent resident visa, but it didn't, so now I have to refuse everything. You don't want to be in that situation. And you don't know when the test dates are. So you may realize too late and then try to book a test, and there may not be one available in time. And finally, you didn't provide proof of funds. And this is an issue that I see a lot as well. And there's a lot of misunderstanding regarding proof of funds, and it's quite a complicated area in terms of whether or not you need to provide it if you're actually working in Canada. If you're outside of Canada and do not have a job offer supported by an LMIA, you need that. And you have to provide proof of it, which is sometimes not that easy. And so those are my top 5 reasons, and that's pretty much all I've got, folks. That is, that's as much information that I can put together into what now has turned into being a little bit longer webinar than I intended. But I want to just identify that within this pilot course that we're doing, there is limited space. I can't take everyone. Otherwise, I'm just not going to be able to have that one-on-one interaction with you that I absolutely must have. And the whole purpose of a pilot is for us to work together and to help the course evolve and to make it just something that's totally awesome. And so you guys are going to be a part of the creation every bit as much as our office, because we're going to be tweaking and modifying what we have and adjusting it to make it better and better and better. And the beauty of the online world is that in real time, almost, I can update and fix it. And it's not something that we have to package and put on a shelf and then, and then have it sold through distributors. This is real time, current the best information that we can possibly give to you in filing your express entry. But like I indicated, there is limited space, so I'd encourage you to act quickly. And I don't want to sound like some cheap car salesman, but the reality is, if you really want in and time is tight, now is the time to do it, because we are only going to be able to take a limited number of individuals for our first pilot course, and then it'll take a little bit of time to kind of revamp it and fix it, and then ultimately, the $497, it's going to be $997. But this is to reward you first, people who trusted me and had enough faith in me to sit on this call for an eternity. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to have Billy jump on when she has a second, and just let you know who the winners are of our best note-taking challenge. So we'll see if Billy's able to get back on, if our technology will work 2 times.
Oh, you actually want me to speak now?
Yeah, I do actually. They're tired of listening to me.
Great. Well, I'm still just going through them really quickly. I've got a lot of responses, so that's great. Right now, I can give you the first winner, and that would
Absolutely.
be Calvin Frederick.
Awesome.
Hopefully, I've said that properly.
Very cool.
Okay. The next would be Sandra Malcolm.
Now, I haven't had a chance to see these wonderful notes, so I'm really excited to to check this out. Maybe I'll incorporate them into the course, and yeah, Sandra and Calvin, I'll give you some recognition for your phenomenal note taking, because half the time I don't know what I'm saying here.
And then was there 3 you wanted me to
Yes.
select?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And the third would be Elizabeth Birchfield.
Perfect. Excellent. So I see Sandra and Calvin have acknowledged their success, which is awesome. And then Elizabeth, how about you? I wonder if Elizabeth is still on. I imagine she is, if she waited, she took the time to take those great notes. Okay, perfect. All right. So now what I want to do is, and please bear with Billy, but I want to take as much time as you need, all of you on this call, to have a question and answer period, to answer the questions that you have, and so I'll turn that time over. So type your comments into the comment box, and I will also try and set get the question. I'll try to follow the questions as well, and answer them as well, just to give Billy a little bit of a hand. Now Calvin, he asked, when do I get to talk? And talk to me. And the answer is, what I'll have you do is just send us an email, and then we will schedule a time that works right away. I won't make you guys wait at all, right away, to answer any questions that you might have. And so just we've got, I think, if you can just send us an email, and you can send it to Billy's email address, that's probably the best, and then we can circle back. Okay, so let's see as far as questions. So fire those away. It looks like Manikanth probably has some questions, because he's already submitted his profile, it looks like. So fire away, Manikanth, if you have any questions. So while we're waiting for new questions, I'm just going to have Billy, I think she has attempted to accumulate some of the questions as we've gone through the webinar here. So I'll have her jump on, and she can just read the question, and then we'll see what we can do to try and answer that for you.
Okay. I think there are quite a few common questions. I'll try to kind of group the questions surrounding the ECA, so the educational credential assessments, the best that I can, because they seem to be a little bit of a hot topic when it comes to the Federal Skilled Trade Program. So some of the questions essentially are the fact that most people are not able to get their trade certifications assessed when they have submitted them.
Yeah.
So what is the solution to getting these credentials assessed?
Yeah, that's a question that we've had a lot. We've had individuals come into our office, and it's also been a topic of much debate amongst my fellow colleagues across the country. And unfortunately, I think the answer that I have for you is not going to be well received. The CIC really shows no mercy. And what I mean by that is they obviously, none of the educational credential testing agencies does that for trade education, trade level education. And the response that we've gotten back from CIC is that, well, really the program is geared and heavily favored to foreign nationals and foreign workers that have job offers supported by LMIAs, who have the 600 points, who really do not even need the educational credentials. They don't need those points to get drawn. And I wish I had a nice solution for you, but there isn't one right now. CIC, until they decide to do something about that, the reality is trade level education is just not receiving CRS points at this stage. If you want to send us an email, and you can just send it to info as well, either to Billy's address or to maybe send it to ht-llp.com to our website. So that's info@ht-llp as in Paul.com. And just send me your email and tell me this is an issue you're dealing with. The moment I hear anything different, the moment I hear some softening or, to any extent with that harsh rule, then, that LMIA issue, if you don't have it, it's going to be really difficult for you to qualify. But I'll let you know if there's any change in the position of CIC with respect to that. All right, Billy, what do you got next for me?
Okay, you might hear some phones ringing in the background, but
maybe
not.
People are calling in their questions here.
It's very possible. There were also some common questions about the actual amount of funds that may need to be required in order to meet those settlement funds. So is there a specific amount that needs to be saved up that would be useful in qualifying?
Yeah, so there actually is on the CIC website, and this is something that I will that I would direct you to. It's called the Low Income Cutoff, LICO. And if you, and this is probably the easiest way to do it, if you type in Express Entry, and even in Google, you can track down these charts, and they're very specific. So it tells you exactly what the amount is that you need to have based on the size of your family, so the size of your dependents that are included with you. And those dollar figures are set in a table that is pretty clear. So if you search LICO, LICO, or low income cutoff, CIC, Express Entry, I'm almost positive that those tables will pop up. I don't have the email address readily available, but you can get those amounts, and then you'll know exactly what you need to show.
Okay. Some other questions were also regarding family members. So is it beneficial to include your family members within your Express Entry application? Or if you choose not to include them, are there options to then sponsor them at a later date?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the most important question is, I guess, really that must be, or the most important factor that you must address is that if you have family members, they absolutely must be disclosed. So if you have a spouse or children, you can't just indicate in your profile that you are single. You must disclose them. Now, you do have the ability to indicate that they're non-accompanying. When you have a non-accompanying family member, there is a specific rule within the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations, Section 117(9)(d), that indicates that if those non-accompanying dependents are not examined by Citizenship and Immigration Canada, you can be forever barred from sponsoring them in the future. And trust me, we understand in this office the challenges that people deal with when they have dependents that are not with them in Canada, or when you're going through a visa office abroad. It can be a real nightmare. But one option you do not have is to not disclose them. And so I can hear you typing a little bit there, Billy.
Sorry.
That's okay. and, and so you don't have the option of not disclosing them. But so there isn't a real easy way of just pretending they don't exist so that things go forward faster. There really isn't. But you can indicate that they're non-accompanying. And when they're non-accompanying, then when you're completing your profile, and ultimately you're submitting your application for permanent residence, then they're not going to be asking for the same documentation that they would if those family members were coming with you. Once you've disclosed and had them examined and gone through the process, then you're eligible to sponsor them at a later date. Sometimes people, one of the primary applicants, husband or wife, wishes to come first and get things settled before they bring their family, and that's perfectly fine. So you can go through that process, but just make sure that you fully disclose their existence and go through the proper steps.
Okay, I didn't know if maybe there were a couple questions that you wanted to address now that are coming in.
Sure.
Okay, and I will select those questions.
Oh, sorry, Billy.
If you like.
Yeah, maybe I'll have you identify some. That's probably safer because, yeah, me trying to talk and scroll and read at the same time is going to sound like a broken, I don't know what, some type of a broken record, or people be questioning whether the download speed on their internet, there's something wrong with it.
Sure. There were some questions, I believe. I don't know how much detail we can get involved with the provincial nominee programs. So we know that some programs are no longer available, or you're not eligible to apply under the PNP programs at this time in some provinces. However, if an individual has already received their nomination from BC, for example, would they still be eligible to apply through the express entry?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So absolutely. Each provincial nominee program has the ability to nominate individuals for permanent residence. Some provinces have opted in to the express entry regime. So CIC has allocated a certain portion of the nominations each year to be used to support people who would be applying through the express entry process. So you can have a BC PNP or an Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program nomination. You could even have that permanent resident application filed and submitted, and we know that the processing times are 16 or 17 months at this stage. You can have that application already submitted and start the process through express entry. So you can have any number of permanent resident applications going at the same time. The only restriction from the standpoint of multiple applications is if you are sponsoring through one of the family class categories, you are only able to be a sponsor of one family member at a time, at least within one class of individuals at a time, one sponsorship in place.
Okay, great. What are the best options, if any, for workers who would be considered low-skilled or unskilled for permanent residence?
I'm glad that that's a good question. That was the very, very first blog I think that I wrote. I remember when I wrote that, it covered the options that were available to people who were running out of time, essentially, or that didn't have a pathway to permanent residence readily available. And I knew that the 4-year cap was coming in April of this year. I knew that there were going to be a number of foreign workers that were going to be running into that cap, and that they really didn't know where to turn. And it was amazing, the discussion through Facebook groups and immigration forums, and people just scrambling for some answers. And so on my website, I think we've reproduced it there, the Canadian Immigration Podcast. I have my top 5 or 10. I like my lists of top fives, things that you can do now to kind of at that time to prepare for when the cap was looming and when the options were running out. And so I'll just direct you back to that, to my website. I can't remember what it's called, but I'll make sure that we'll make a note of who this is that asked that question, and then I'll send it off. But you can just go to the Canadian Immigration Podcast website, and it's interesting because that particular blog, I know it went fairly viral because my firm website, HTLLP, I still remember the day when we released that one. We had over, I think, 12,500 people that came to the website to look at the article in one day, and it crashed my site not once but twice. And so so there's some suggestions there, but just off the top of my head, it's really tough. I'll be honest with you. If you're in a low skill position and you don't have pathways to either be promoted to a supervisory position, with the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program and the BCPNP suspended, with the volumes of applications of individuals that have just really overwhelmed those departments, the options for a low skill worker in Canada are extremely remote. If there is no pathway to a more supervisory or skilled position, sometimes I have people think outside the box. If you're not in a relationship with a Canadian right now where there's a sponsorship possibility, and I would never encourage anyone to just go out and find a Canadian to marry. Sometimes I'll indicate to people to consider going to school, because a foreign worker can transition to go to school, and then while you're in school you can work up to 20 hours on that study permit while you're attending your courses, and then in the regular scheduled breaks you can work full time over Christmas and then throughout the summer, and those are open work permits to work wherever you like. But ultimately, there is not a lot of options. Some people will counsel filing a humanitarian and compassion application, but I don't subscribe to that philosophy. The reality is it's pretty difficult to get those H&C applications approved, and I just don't believe in people submitting applications where there's really no hope of it getting approved. So if you are capping out, that's really the only options. It's really difficult. So I feel for people that are in those circumstances.
We do have a question, and I think it's a fairly common question in regards to how do those individuals who have already submitted their profile try to increase their score?
Yes. Yeah, and that's a good question. So that's one of the things that I actually addressed within the webinar to some extent. There is a lot of just basic things that you can do to try and increase your scores. Obviously, if you have the ability to increase your education, like I indicated in my top 5 list, I guess, increase your education. Often English, if your scores are a little bit lower, those are something that you can work at quickly, at least as quickly as you can. Now, I lived in Portugal for 2 years and had the privilege of learning to speak Portuguese, and I can tell you that it takes time to learn a new language, and even to improve and hone your skills. But usually the areas of writing, writing and reading tend to be one of the more challenging areas. And so taking English courses and improving your English is one of the very first areas that I direct people to. But ultimately, with the age issue that you're dealing with, after you reach a certain age and then the points start to drop, it kind of can work against you to some extent with respect to how long it takes to then go and get a master's if you want to increase your education, or to get a PhD, for example. But education, language, and work experience are some of the main options. And then, as I indicated before, sometimes you just need to find a way to get to Canada on a work permit of any shape or form. so that you can then get exposure to companies who may be looking to employ individuals like you. And then finally, if you are able to land a job, if you can find an employer who is able to offer a job offer that is at a skilled level, then that will give you those extra points. And we've obviously heard from some individuals that, if you continue to try and connect with employers, and some people are actually having success, which is wonderful. You want to make sure that you're tapping into whatever avenues you can. And that as I answer this question, now think to myself, I know that there are some recruiting companies, and I traditionally don't have a lot of I haven't had a lot of good experiences with recruiting companies, but there are some out there that are excellent. And I think I need to write a blog. I think I need to do a new blog. And what I'm going to do is probably create my top 10 list of reputable recruiting companies that potentially could match foreign nationals up with employers. So I'm not sure how many people are still on the call listening, but how many people would actually be interested in that? Me sharing some insight. Maybe if you're outside of Canada looking for that match, how many of you would be interested in a blog like that kind of give direction to some recruiting companies that you can actually reach out to and provide your resume to that are looking to match employers with foreign nationals? Anyone interested in that? Okay, good. We do have a few people. Francois, Diogo, that's great. And that's super. I see there's a few people. Great. So that's something I think I should do. Now I lost my train of thought. Did I answer the question? Maybe Billy's looking for other questions. I think I think I answered that question.
You're good. You finished your answer there?
That was my question. I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, and I hope I answered the previous question that was asked.
I believe so, or at least
Yeah, I think I covered everything.
I was happy with the answer anyway.
Okay, good.
There was a question, and I believe that Shelley unfortunately has had to leave, but
Yes.
there were some questions regarding, those that maybe needed more than just to the end of the webinar to commit to registering for the Express Entry Pilot course, how long they would actually have to register.
Yeah. Well, right now, obviously, the most important factor is that that we get started right away. And part of the advantage to having the course, and I actually intend to start it next week on Monday. And so we want people who can benefit from it and are interested in taking it, especially with the 50% off, that they act now and that we get our quota for the course so that we can start immediately to offer it. Because once it's going and once we've got even more resources and everything sunk into it, then the price is going to go back up to $997. But at this stage, I want to give all of those people who are on this webinar who have stuck with it the opportunity to have it at a drastically reduced price. And so the because it's a pilot at this stage, that's why I'm offering it at that level. Now, remember, we've got just a number of people that are on this webinar, and there will be quite a few more as well that are going to be listening to the recording of it. And so ultimately, it's there's limited space. So so I guess at that stage, I haven't yet decided exactly, when that. Well, I guess I could. Do you know what? We'll leave it open a little bit longer. Okay, so we'll leave it open for another few days, and you guys have stuck with it for this long. And if some of you need a little bit longer to think about it, my only caveat is that understand if it fills up, and once it's full, then the price is gonna go back up to the regular price. So that's my only caveat, is if you do wait, then you may end up having to pay the full price for it versus the reduced 50% price that I'm offering right now. And understand too, it's, our 1 hour consult that I charge is about $400. So I'd like to think that this is going to be offering tremendous value.
Great, thanks. There was a question in regarding to if you can have multiple profiles going. So for example, if an individual has used a representative to submit a profile and they essentially become unresponsive, and now the individual themselves feels that they would just like to apply for the express entry on their own, will they be able to have two profiles submitted under their name?
Good question. Okay, so I know, Billy, you read a little bit on the website about the ability to kind of disconnect from a representative that's basically freaking useless. We get some questions from people like that, and when within the portal there is an ability to cancel and to withdraw. And if you have a profile that's kind of floating in the pool, then that process it should be relatively easy to just withdraw it. But ultimately, when it comes to filing multiple profiles, that's something that I would strongly discourage, because it's going to confuse the system, and the system itself, this portal, this online portal, is awful enough as it is. The least complicated you can make it, the better, because I could see all kinds of horrific things happening with multiple profiles, and then you getting drawn twice with two profiles, and then they ask for information that you provide on one versus another, and then ultimately your application is refused, and then they refuse both once they realize that they're the same person. And so I just see just a nightmare happening if you're operating with multiple profiles. Billy, do you remember what the instructions were? Obviously, we don't deal with a lot of our clients wanting to leave us, so I don't know from a practical perspective the logistics behind that. But do you remember what you had read or seen, or maybe I'm just dreaming this up?
No, not specific details, but you're correct. Like there is a link within there that, essentially allows an individual who has applied on their own to then link up their application to, let's say, a use of representative they now wish to have assist them with completing their application. And within that, it appeared to be a request as well to then same thing, to remove a use of representative that they have, or then add a link to a new account. But I couldn't really get any further than that in my investigation, because you would have to obtain specific information from the representative or the individual client themselves about detailed information submitted through the profile. So, but it does appear to be a way to definitely, disconnect from use of representative or add your profile to a use of representative.
Yeah, and as you can see, we definitely don't have answer to every single question that is asked, but that one is definitely outside of our area of expertise for the simple reason, like I said, that we don't have a lot of our clients who are looking to disengage because we suck.
Okay, perfect. We also have a question about whether or not someone was trying to complete their login application to the job bank, but it will not accept it because their SIN number has expired. Is there any avenues to rectify this?
Okay, so SIN numbers are tied to work permits. So if your SIN has expired, that usually means that there's an issue with the work permit. So I think you've got bigger issues than just the social insurance number expiring, because those SINs, if you're in implied status or restoration of status, yes, that can cause you problems for sure. But yeah, that type of an issue. Sometimes just with your eligibility for express entry, you have to right the ship, and you have to have that that work permit that's in place. in order to support the application. Because understand, there's people all over the world that do not have SINs and do not, have any entry into the labor market that are able to submit these profiles. So I think the issue is more on the work permit side, um, and just getting that rectified in order to proceed. Because understand, this is a computer that is really doing the initial assessment of eligibility and initial entry into express entry. It's just a computer algorithm, and and so they don't understand those things. And so when you're dealing with a computer, a software program versus a live person, it's very rigid, and some people are going to be found ineligible until they meet those minimum parameters that the computer expects to see.
Okay, there's another question that just came through not too long ago, and hopefully I can summarize it the best way that I can. So basically, if someone has been working in Canada in a skilled work experience, over the 1 year, so for example, in this case, it has been 3 years that they've been working in a supervisor role. They've recently been promoted to assistant manager that has now been supported by the LMIA, so that would give them, the higher points using that LMIA. However, they have not obtained their experience as an assistant store manager at this time to meet the 1 year requirement. Should they still apply for express entry based on the possibility that they would meet the Canadian experience class, even though the LMIA supported work permit, they haven't obtained that 1 year of experience yet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So to meet the minimum requirements, you need to have at least 1 year of work experience in your chosen, designation. And ultimately, when even when it comes to moving from a supervisor to a manager, that's also going to affect your English language. So you need to be aware that the Canadian language benchmark standard that you have to obtain if it's under Canadian experience class is going to jump from a 5 to a 7. So that's something to be aware of as well. And so you may wish to choose to use the experience under the old category. However, ultimately, it's a little bit of a catch-22 because the job offer is going to be supporting the more the managerial level. And so that's a tough situation. And I don't know if I have a really good answer without really diving a little bit more deep into the specifics of the situation. And that's really a classic example of there's probably more going on that would be really helpful to know in order to give an answer that really meets the needs of the person who's asking that question. And I don't mean to kind of skitter around answering it. There's reasons why you do one thing versus another, and at this stage, that's not something probably that I'd be able to answer in just a general fashion. But ultimately, you just need to be aware that to get the full 600 points, you have to have you have to be submitting your application under the category that or the position that the LMIA is linked to.
Okay, great. Kind of an extension a little bit to that question in regards to the LMIA and getting the 600 points. If you have a nomination on one of the PNP programs, is that equivalent to obtaining the 600 points as if you were to have an LMIA?
Yeah, so certain provincial nominee programs have specific express entry streams. And so if your provincial nomination is through one of those express entry streams, then yes, it serves the exact same purpose as an LMIA. However, if it's not and it's just a regular nomination, then no, it doesn't. You have to go through the regular provincial nominee stream and file your application through that outside of express entry.
Okay, next question. If an individual is already in Canada, will they need to show funds after receiving an invitation to apply for permanent residence?
Yes, so it depends. So when and that question doesn't quite give me enough information to be able to clarify. There's a number of factors, including which permanent resident program you're being, you're receiving the invitation to apply for, what your job status is. Just because you're in Canada doesn't necessarily change things. Ultimately, you need to meet the regulatory requirements for an exemption under the the requirement for proof of funds. Generally speaking, if you have a job offer supported by an LMIA, then generally speaking, you're fine and you don't need to provide proof of funds. However, if you don't, then there's circumstances depending on which permanent resident category that you're actually granted the ITA under, that would clarify that. Now, with that being said, let's see. I did do a podcast, and I'm pretty sure that topic came up. Yeah, in terms of proof of funds and whether or not you need to include them. Just depending on the type of invitation to apply that you received and which permanent resident category you're in. So I'll have to, if you go back, I know that one of the questions, it was actually a question of a listener that I had included with one of my podcasts, but I can't remember right now which one. And I did provide a little bit more detail in terms of what the requirements are. But that's actually a good topic well, I can tell you for a fact that it will be addressed in the course.
Great, thanks. I think this might be somewhat of an interesting and an important question to address in many aspects. So we'll see how in detail you want to go with it, but it might be kind of fun. If an individual is in Canada and they want to include work experience that they obtained while they were applying for restoration of their status, is that possible?
Wow. These are some tough questions. While you're applying for restoration of status, the first thing that you need to understand is that if you're applying for restoration, that means that you are no longer authorized to work. This is not a situation of implied status. So if you submit your work permit extension application before it expires, then you can continue to work, and I would have no issue saying that work experience continues to be valid, claimable work experience. But if you're in restoration of status, and this is something I deal with people all the time, you are no longer eligible to work. You may be eligible to submit a restoration application to restore your status, but if you continue to work under restored, a position of restoration, it's considered to be unauthorized work. And so now whether CIC comes in, or CBSA, the Canada Border Service Agency, comes and hunts you down for unauthorized work, or whether they throw the book at you, that's a different story. But from a legal standpoint, that work, I would have to say that it does not count towards permanent residence if it is fully disclosed to CIC. Some people get around it by, at the end of the day, I'll pass. I won't go down that road. But just understand that restoration does not authorize you to work.
Okay. Let's see. I think there were some questions that had came in at the beginning too, or throughout the webinar, regarding gaining experience for the CEC category, work experience in Canada. Would part-time work experience also count in addition to full-time work experience to accumulate the 1 year that's required?
Let's see. This is a classic example of where I got distracted reading a question myself. I'm sorry. Could you read that one to me again, Billy? I'm sorry. I'm not gonna look at these. I'm closing it. Okay.
Okay, so when you're trying to calculate whether or not you've obtained your 1 year of work experience to potentially qualify under the Canadian Experience class, are you able to include part-time work that you have maybe obtained while you're in Canada, in addition to maybe, let's say, 8 months of full-time work that you have also obtained to then make up your 1 year of work experience?
Yeah, and that's, I know within a comment section, it's difficult to get the full context. The rules are stated that the skilled work experience can be accumulated through full-time or the equivalent part-time continuous work experience. And so that question doesn't give me quite enough to answer it clearly, because we don't know whether is it the same position? Is it a different job? And there's just a few more things probably within that would necessitate just a more in-depth look at the situation. And I face this all the time with people who are asking questions. Often the question is very contextual, and it depends on so many other factors that a simple yes or no, it's just not possible based on the information. And that's where it gets into the specifics. And I never want to be a lawyer who dodges things and is trying to force people down a certain path. But in all honesty, that's something that we would canvass in the course in far greater detail. And I probably wouldn't feel comfortable giving an answer to that one unless I knew a little bit more about it. And it definitely goes into more of a specific type of a situation.
Okay, so for those individuals that are on a postgraduate work permit and they have not yet received an invitation to apply, should they consider looking at applying under the provincial nominee program?
My advice is that you look at applying under every single category that is possibly available to you. Citizenship and Immigration Canada made the world the way it is today. And if they are the ones who created the uncertainty, then I'm going to advise every single one of my clients that they are to apply under every single category that they're eligible to apply under. So if you have an option, pursue it, because nothing is guaranteed anymore.
Okay, I think I haven't seen too many new questions that are coming in at this point, and hopefully I was able to address most of them that it came through during the webinar. I guess there is one here that came in regards to a comment that you had made during the webinar regarding first applying through the job bank. It says you had indicated that an express entry applicant should go first to the job bank. However, in this particular case, they have attempted to log into the job bank, 5+ times, but they're still unable to complete the job bank requirements because of their SIN number. So by having this problem, do they still have a chance to apply under express entry without going through the job bank matching?
Okay, I'm trying to remember now. I believe, and this is something that you cannot quote me on, you can just test it out. I believe those job bank secret magical registration numbers are linked to your passport number. And so I can't remember how many digits they are, but one suggestion to kind of go around this little workaround is to type in the whatever number of digits is required. I'll have to look and see. I think, Billy, we've got the email address probably of the person who registered, who sent this question. But try punching in those numbers. I can't remember how many they are, but that are linked to the last few digits of your passport number. So try that, and that might be a little workaround. Because otherwise, this is another classic example of work status, and not being in a perfectly valid work status can cause problems with applying through express entry. And when you are in a situation where you desperately need to have express entry work for you to allow you to stay in Canada because you're capping out, we see that all the time. So I definitely feel for you.
Okay, one other question would be, how long should an individual wait to reapply under express entry if they have been declined? There isn't a specific relation to declined, meaning their profile or their permanent resident portion, but maybe in general, if they haven't been selected to apply for permanent residence, or even if their permanent resident application has been denied, is there a specific time frame they should wait before they reapply again?
Yeah, and my response is don't wait for anything. If it's, if I guess I'm still trying to understand, and yeah, the question isn't quite specific enough as to what the problem was. I suspect it's someone who's gotten their permanent resident application refused for some technical reason, and the reality is get it put back in immediately. We had a situation where we failed to upload a police clearance in the early days of Express Entry because my meetings with the officers in Ottawa at one of our national conferences confirmed that as long as we used our best efforts and explained why we didn't include it, that would be good enough. And of course, it wasn't. So we had a very critical situation, and an individual, we had to take an application that was refused and immediately refile it, the profile. And we did the moment we got the bounce back, and there was another draw the very next day, and they were right back into the queue. So unless there's some other information that that would be important for me to understand about that question, I don't see any reason for delaying resubmitting a profile.
Okay, great. Another question that's just come in, is someone eligible to apply for Express Entry even if they are currently a visitor in Canada?
You can be a visitor, you can be overseas with no connection. Express Entry to, for all intents and purposes is is open to anyone who is, admissible to Canada essentially to apply. So the fact that you're here as a visitor is not a problem at all.
Okay, I'm just waiting for an additional comment here to a question that an individual would like to have addressed, but I just needed a little bit of clarification before I brought it forward. So, okay, the other question here would be, does an individual need to get all of their degrees assessed when they enter the pool, or before they enter the pool, I guess, or submit their profile, or do they only have to get the highest degree?
Yeah, so when you get your credentials assessed, they're always looking at the highest degree. But sometimes you have to understand that if the testing centers may want to see the path towards that highest degree. And so I always recommend my clients to get everything assessed, and then ultimately understand that you can get points for having 2 bachelor's levels degrees, for instance. Different points versus 1. And sometimes you may have a master's degree that when you get it assessed, it drops you down to a bachelor's. And if you don't have your bachelor's assessed, then you lose out on the points for having 2 degrees. So it's really important that you spare no expense when you are going through the process of getting an educational credential assessed, to get everything, even though the highest tends to be the one that gives you the points, there is still the ability to have more than one degree, and which will result in more points than if your master's degree was then devalued down to a single degree. I hope that makes sense. So yes, absolutely, I recommend that you get everything assessed. And then I think a part of that question, Billy, if I'm just looking at it here, also says, do you need to have that when you enter yourself into the pool? Well, I always counsel all of my clients to have everything ready, just for the same reasons that I explained at the beginning of the webinar. You could receive an invitation to apply the very next day, and then Citizenship and Immigration Canada is asking for copies of degrees and things like that to support your permanent resident application. And there's a lot of uncertainty still about, when the computer triggers a need for certain documents. And you may say, well, I don't need to include that document because I don't need those points, those comprehensive ranking system points to qualify. And I wasn't awarded points for those factors and during the CRS. So why is it asking for a copy of that degree now? And to a large extent, that's an issue that you could face. And when you're dealing with an online filing system that is heavily algorithm based, you don't want to be in a situation where you don't upload something, and then you get your application refused, rightly or wrongly, because you failed to upload something that they told you needed to have. And if you haven't taken steps to get it, ECAs are one thing that can take time to get. And so I just recommend that you go forward and you don't delay.
Okay, and I'm not sure if you can see some of the comments from Arman, but he had some questions regarding whether or not his current research, which is currently unpaid work, would give him an advantage during his application.
Yeah, and I think you probably recall the statement that unpaid work doesn't count. And so, as far as an advantage or disadvantage, there's really no CRS points that are awarded for, for unpaid work experience in Canada. It just doesn't fit within the comprehensive ranking system and how they allocate it. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there would be any particular advantage at that stage.
Okay, great. We have another question about the job bank regarding, for example, if an individual employer is willing to hire someone as a food service supervisor, do they still need to log into the job bank if they've been offered that job?
Just to clarify, is this an LMIA-based job offer? Did they say?
That I'm not sure. It's just kind of a hypothetical, it looks like to me.
Okay. So essentially, usually those positions are going to be supported by a labor market impact assessment. And if your job offer is supported by an LMIA, then that is a valid job offer for the purposes of express entry. And because of that, you do not need to submit your profile into the job bank. But largely, the factor that will trigger the need to submit your profile to the job bank, or at least upload your personal profile into the job bank, will be how you answered the questions on your profile. And so it may be that the job offer came in later, and if that's the case, then you're probably still going to have to upload your profile into the job bank. But it's a relatively straightforward situation, except if you're the individual who is currently in a restorative process.
Okay.
Well, I remember one other person, as I was skimming, did ask the difference between a permanent LMIA and a regular one, which we didn't describe in a lot of detail. So yes, companies have the ability to support an individual who's, let's say, outside of the country and doesn't necessarily need a work permit. They are able to apply for a permanent labor market impact assessment, which does not require a $1,000 processing fee. So that's the free one, supported only for permanent processes. And I call it a permanent LMIA. And so with that, if you were able to be placed on that type of an LMIA, you would get the full 600 points and be virtually guaranteed to receive an invitation to apply. There is also the ability to obtain a hybrid LMIA that is a permanent one to support permanent residence, but also eligible to obtain a work permit at the same time. And that LMIA does carry with it the $1,000, but companies don't have to submit a transition plan, which is another component to the LMIA process, which is an entirely different webinar.
Great.
And I see as I look at Armin's questions here, like Armin, I feel for you here about the difficulties, the fact that you're here in unpaid work, and the contributions that you're making, and all the resources that the university provides you. It's always difficult with those characters because ultimately the program isn't designed to facilitate the transition of that type of a position into permanent residence in Canada. So so I feel for you.
And I think it was addressed in the webinar as well, but there appears to be some questions, related to whether or not work experience, under a co-op work experience, or while they were here, going to school, would that work experience count towards Canadian Experience Class?
Right. Yeah. We covered that a little bit earlier in the webinar, and the answer is no, unfortunately, and that's right, straight from the Citizenship and Immigration Canada instructions and their requirements. So you can't count that towards Canadian work experience. And I guess ultimately, the rationale is someone who's taking 4 years of school, who is working part time, the 20 hours a week throughout their studies. They want them to get a full-time job or to work after they've graduated before they're willing to grant that work experience. And actually, why they've created that distinction. Well, I guess it's for policy reasons. Once again, this lack of of love they're showing to all the postgrad work permit holders who really, in my mind, I think that's the biggest tragedy right now is just how they were offered, really, in many respects, even by the government authorities, maybe not within CIC, but those who are doing recruiting campaigns for the schools. There was definitely held out the possibility of permanent residence, and maybe even a little bit stronger than that. But for years, students were highly favored by the government, and we appreciated the billions of dollars they brought into our economy, and then the rug just was pulled completely out. So we'll see what happens with our new Liberal government if they take any steps to reverse some of those very difficult and painful decisions the previous Conservative government made.
Okay, I'm sure I've missed a few questions that were maybe posted earlier, so I don't know if those individuals would still be on or not, and wanted to repost if something has addressed at this point in time, or if you want to respond to the most recent question posted.
Yeah, so as I've looked through here, I see some of the questions are just too detailed to be able to answer. If we haven't answered your question and yours was a little bit more fulsome, please understand that those questions are really ones that are best suited to be dealt with within the course itself, and they go beyond the level of general, I guess, generalness that affords itself to this type of a webinar. So you would those individuals, I would encourage you to take full advantage of the unlimited emails and questions and everything else associated with the new course.
And it's interesting, there have been a few people commenting on whether or not the new Liberal government will have any effective change on the immigration laws coming soon or not.
Yeah. Well, we know that some of the things they have discussed that they're going to look into is expanding the parent and grandparent, the family class category a little bit, and there has been some rumblings about maybe reversing the age of a dependent back to what it once was, but ultimately it's going to take a little bit of time for that to filter through the surface. But I'm almost positive I have tons of new comments and new content for the Canadian Immigration Podcast. So I'll keep everyone apprised of any little nuggets that I'm able to learn about with respect to our current government and their plans for immigration policy development. All right. Well, it's about 8:45 p.m. Mountain Time here, and I think both Billy and my families are pretty anxious to having us come home. We definitely didn't intend to take this long, but we appreciate everyone's questions, and hopefully everyone found this helpful. And also those of you who will be listening to this in a recorded format, we hope that that the information is helpful and useful for you. We welcome your comments and all of your participation in this Canadian immigration podcast community, and in this case now our Canadian Immigration Institute community. So any suggestions or tips that you might have for us and how to make this a little bit better, we welcome that, and ultimately, we also welcome you to share this with anyone you might know that could benefit from it. It's a little bit more lengthy than I intended, but the goal was to make sure that no one walked away without having received some value from this. And so please share it. Like us on Facebook if you haven't already, and give us an opportunity to share this knowledge with as many people as we possibly can and get the reach out there as far as we can go. And thanks so much. And Billy, I don't know if you have any other final comments.
No, I just want to offer my thanks as well, and hopefully I was able to respond to a few of the questions anyways throughout the webinar, and they were all great questions, and thanks again for attending.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.